She didn't just kill God's prophets. She replaced God in an entire nation for 22 years. Israel didn't fall by war. It fell by influence. A queen, a system, a slow corruption no one stopped. And by the time they realized it, it was already too late. But this didn't begin in Israel. It began with a girl, raised inside power, trained to understand something most people never see. That belief is not just something you follow, it is something you control. She wasn't taught to worship. She was taught to influence, to shape what people think, what people fear, what people trust. And by the time she left that world, she didn't just believe in her gods. She knew how to use them. Her name was Jezebel. Welcome to the Forbidden Bible, where we uncover the stories. They never told you this way. If you think you know the story of Jezebel, you don't. Because this isn't just about a wicked queen. This is about how power can rewrite truth, how influence can replace faith, and how an entire nation can walk away from God without even noticing it. And here's the terrifying part. It didn't start with evil. It started with something that looked completely normal. So how did it happen? How did one woman change everything? To understand Jezebel, we have to go back to a place where power was everything and faith was just another weapon. And that place was Phoenicia. Picture this, a coastline filled with ships, cutting through deep blue water, carrying gold, spices, purple dye, and something far more powerful, influence. This was Phoenicia, a civilization that didn't conquer with armies first, but with trade. Their cities, Tyre, Sidon, rose like shining crowns on the sea, busy ports, crowded markets, voices shouting in different languages, Egyptian traders, Assyrian merchants, foreign envoys negotiating deals. Money moved fast here, but something else moved even faster. Ideas, beliefs, control. Because Phoenicia understood something most kingdoms didn't. If you control what people believe, you don't need to control them by force. And that's where their true power lived. Not in ships, not in gold, but in their gods. Step inside one of their temples. The noise of the market fades away, and something heavier replaces it. The air is thick, heavy with incense, and something metallic, blood. Stone idols stand tall, silent, watching, their faces carved with power, their eyes empty, yet impossible to ignore. This is where Baal ruled, not just as a god, but as a system. Baal controlled the storm, and the storm controlled everything. Rain meant crops. Crops meant food. Food meant survival. No rain meant death. So when the sky stayed empty, people didn't question science. They questioned God. Or worse, they feared they had angered him. And fear is the easiest way to control people. Next to Baal, Astarte, the goddess of fertility, desire, and war. In her worship, love wasn't gentle. It was intense, physical, and often violent. Because in Phoenicia, religion wasn't about becoming better. It was about getting results. More crops, more children, more power. And if the gods demanded something in return, people gave it. Animals first, then something worse. The rituals grew darker, louder, more desperate. Drums echoed through temple walls. Chants filled the air. Priests dancing, voices rising, until emotion replaced reason. And in those moments, people would do anything because they believed the gods were watching. And if they didn't give enough, they would lose everything. This wasn't just religion. This was control. A system where kings ruled bodies, but priests ruled minds. And when those two powers came together, no one could resist them. That's what made Phoenicia dangerous. Not their ships, not their wealth, but their ability to reshape how people think, to make wrong feel right and darkness feel normal. And somewhere inside that system, someone was paying very close attention, watching how it worked, learning how to use it, not to serve the gods, but to control everything they controlled. His name was Ethbaal. Before Jezebel, there was a man who understood something most people never do. Power doesn't belong to the strongest man in the room. It belongs to the man who controls what everyone believes is true. His name was Ethbaal. He wasn't born into royalty. He wasn't chosen by blood. He earned his place in the shadows as a priest inside the temple, where fear was stronger than law and belief was stronger than truth. Every day, he stood in front of people who came desperate, farmers begging for rain, mothers praying for children, men offering everything they had just to avoid losing everything. And Ethbaal watched closely. He noticed something others ignored. The people didn't question the rituals. They didn't question the cost. They only cared about one thing: results. If the rain came, the gods were real. If the crops grew, the priests were right. And if nothing happened, they didn't blame the system. They blamed themselves. That was the moment everything changed for him, because he realized something terrifying. Truth didn't matter. Perception did. And whoever controlled perception controlled reality. That's when Ethbaal stopped being a priest and started becoming something else, a strategist. He began studying everything, not just rituals, but people. Who was loyal, who was frustrated, who felt ignored, who could be turned. He spoke less, but listened more. He built trust quietly, one guard at a time, one official at a time, one conversation at a time. No one noticed, because nothing looked unusual. And that was the genius of it. Real power never announces itself. It builds in silence. Meanwhile, the king believed everything was stable. The kingdom was wealthy. The temples were active. The people were obedient. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But underneath, the system had already shifted, not by force, but by influence, and Ethbaal was at the center of it. Then came the night when everything would change. A royal banquet. Music filled the halls. Wine flowed freely. Laughter echoed through stone walls. The king sat at the center, surrounded by men he trusted, men who smiled, men who raised their cups, men who had already chosen a different future. Ethbaal stood nearby, calm, controlled, invisible, just like always, until the moment came. It happened fast, too fast for confusion, too fast for reaction. A single movement, a single strike. The blade went in clean, precise, intentional. The king gasped, but there was no time to understand, no time to fight back. And just like that, it was over. Silence. For a moment, the entire room froze. This was the moment where everything could collapse, where chaos could begin, where loyalty could be tested. But none of that happened, because something far more dangerous had already taken place. The guards didn't attack. The officials didn't shout. No one resisted. Why? Because Ethbaal didn't just kill a king that night. He replaced him long before the blade was ever drawn. In their minds, in their trust, in their belief of who should lead. That's how real power works. By the time you see it, it's already too late to stop it. By morning, there was no debate, no rebellion, no confusion. Only one outcome. Ethbaal was king, not by inheritance, not by right, but by control. And once he took the throne, he did something no king before him had done. He removed the line between temple and throne. No separation, no balance, only one system, faith and power, merged into one force. Under his rule, everything intensified. More temples were built, more priests were trained, more rituals were performed, louder, darker, more demanding, because the more people depended on the gods, the more they depended on him. And Ethbaal understood that better than anyone. He wasn't just ruling a kingdom, he was designing a system that could spread, a system that didn't need armies, a system that could enter another nation and change it from the inside. And then he made the most important decision of his life. He looked at his daughter, not as a child, but as a strategy, a future, a weapon, someone who could carry his system beyond Phoenicia, into other kingdoms, into places where his influence had not yet reached. Her name was Jezebel, and from the moment she was born, she wasn't raised to live. She was raised to conquer. Jezebel wasn't born into darkness. She was shaped by it. From the moment she could see, this was the world around her. Smoke rising from altars, voices chanting in rhythm, fire reflecting in stone walls. This wasn't something she visited. This was where she lived. The palace of Sidon was not separate from the temple. It was connected to it. Every hallway, every chamber carried the same presence. Incense, whispers, ritual. As a child, she didn't grow up protected from it. She was brought into it early. Intentionally, she stood beside her father, watching ceremonies unfold. Animals placed on stone altars, knives raised, voices rising together. And then, the moment, blood. The crowd didn't turn away. They leaned in, because to them, this wasn't horror. It was devotion. And Jezebel watched carefully, not with fear, but with curiosity. Because when something is repeated enough, it stops feeling wrong. It starts feeling normal. That's how belief is built, not through truth, but through repetition. And Jezebel learned that lesson early. But her training didn't stop at observation. It went deeper, much deeper. She was taught how rituals worked, not just what to do, but why people responded to them, how sound creates emotion, how timing creates tension, how silence can control a crowd. She learned how to speak slowly, so people would listen, how to raise her voice, so people would feel something, how to say very little and still be understood. This wasn't education. This was conditioning. She was also trained in the court. She listened to negotiations, watched alliances being formed, saw how deals were made and broken. She noticed something important. People didn't always tell the truth. but they always revealed their weakness. And once you knew that, you could control them. So she practiced, not openly, but quietly, testing words, testing reactions, learning what worked and what didn't. While other girls learned obedience, Jezebel learned leverage. While others were taught to follow, she was taught to lead without being seen. And then there was beauty, because in her world, beauty wasn't decoration. It was strategy. She learned how to present herself, how to enter a room and shift attention without speaking, how to hold eye contact just long enough to create tension, how to smile without revealing intention. Beauty became another form of control, and slowly everything came together. Religion, power, influence, all connected, all usable, and Jezebel understood it better than anyone her age ever should. But the most dangerous thing about her wasn't what she knew, it was what she believed. She didn't think she was learning power. She believed she was chosen for it. That belief removed fear, removed hesitation, removed doubt. And without doubt, there is no limit to what someone can justify. By the time she reached adulthood, she was no longer observing the system. She was part of it. And more than that, she was ready to expand it. Because Sidon was never the end. It was only the beginning. Beyond the sea, there was another kingdom, Israel, a nation with one God, one belief, one truth, but also a nation divided, weak at the top, vulnerable from within. And Jezebel saw something others didn't. Not a kingdom to fight, but a kingdom to change. And soon, she would have the perfect opportunity, not through war, not through invasion, but through something far more powerful, a relationship, a king, and a decision that would change everything. Far from Sidon, beyond the shifting waters of the Mediterranean, there was another kingdom, Israel, a nation built on something very different. One God, one law, one identity. For generations, that belief had defined them. But now, that foundation was beginning to crack. The kingdom had already been divided, north and south. Kings rising quickly, falling just as fast. Loyalty shifting, trust weakening. And in the north, a new king sat on the throne, Ahab. He wasn't careless. He wasn't foolish. In fact, he was exactly the kind of king a nation would want in a dangerous world. He built, he expanded, he strengthened cities like Samaria. He understood trade, diplomacy, strategy. He knew that survival wasn't just about faith, it was about positioning. And when he looked beyond Israel's borders, he saw something undeniable. Phoenicia, not just a nation, but a gateway to the sea, to wealth, to influence far beyond anything Israel had known. Phoenician ships didn't just travel, they connected worlds. Egypt, distant islands, foreign empires, and with them came resources Israel couldn't produce. Cedar wood from Lebanon, fine metals, luxury goods, everything Ahab needed to elevate his kingdom. So when the invitation came, he didn't ignore it. He went to Sidon, and the moment he arrived, he realized something. This place was different, not just richer, stronger, but darker. The city was alive, markets overflowing with goods, voices speaking different languages, movement everywhere. But beneath all of it, there was something else, something heavier, something controlled. When he entered the palace, it became undeniable. This wasn't just a royal court, it was a temple. Statues of Baal stood like guards. Flames burned continuously. Symbols covered the walls. There was no separation between power and worship. And for the first time, Ahab felt it. This wasn't just a kingdom, it was a system, and at the center of it stood Ethbaal, not just a king, a priest, a man who ruled both throne and belief. Their meetings lasted days, not hours, days. Maps were spread across tables, trade routes traced with careful hands, resources calculated. Phoenicia offered access to the sea, protection for ships, craftsmanship. Israel offered grain, oil, livestock. It was a perfect alliance, almost too perfect, and Ahab knew it, because nothing this valuable comes without a cost. On the final night, during a banquet filled with music and wine, the real offer was made. Ethbaal spoke calmly. Agreements written in ink can be erased, but agreements written in blood endure. Then he said it. My daughter, Jezebel. The room grew still, because this changed everything. This wasn't trade anymore. This was binding, permanent. Ahab didn't respond, because he understood exactly what this meant. This wasn't a marriage. It was a gateway, a merging of two worlds. And one of those worlds was far stronger in influence than the other. And that night, something else happened. Not in the hall, not in front of advisors, but in private, a meeting that was never written down, but changed everything. Ahab expected terms, numbers, conditions of alliance. But Jezebel didn't speak like a diplomat. She spoke like someone who already understood the outcome. If I come to Israel, I do not come as a guest. I come with my priests, my gods, my rituals, my way. Ahab's expression didn't change, but his silence did, because in that moment, he understood. This was no longer negotiation. This was transformation. You're asking for influence, he said. Jezebel stepped closer, not aggressive, not emotional. Zetan, I'm offering you power. Silence. Longer this time, because Ahab knew something most men ignore. Power always comes with a cost, and this cost was not temporary. It would not stay contained. It would spread through temples, through people, through belief. And once belief changes, everything changes. If I say yes, he said slowly. Jezebel didn't wait. Then nothing stays the same. Not a threat, a fact. And that was the moment. Not the ceremony, not the crown, but this, the decision before everything began. That night, he couldn't sleep. He replayed everything, the wealth, the access, the future he could build. And then the risk, because bringing Jezebel into Israel meant bringing her system with her priests, her gods. Her influence, and influence doesn't stay contained. His advisors spoke quietly. This will bring power, but it will also bring change. One we can measure, the other we cannot. Another warned him, your people follow one God. Are you prepared to test that? Ahab said nothing, because deep down, he already knew. This wasn't just opportunity. It was compromise. And compromise always feels small at the beginning, until it isn't. He stood between two choices, faith or expansion, truth or advantage. And, like many leaders, he convinced himself he could manage both, that nothing would truly change, that he would stay in control, that Israel would remain the same, just stronger. That was the illusion, because you cannot invite something designed to replace truth and expect it to remain harmless. But Ahab made his decision. The next morning, he gave his answer. Yes, and with that word, everything shifted. He didn't just accept a wife. He opened a door Israel had never opened before. A door to influence, to a different belief, to a system built to spread. And once something enters by invitation, it doesn't leave easily, because now it belongs. Soon, Jezebel would come, not as a stranger, but as a queen, and Israel would not be conquered from the outside. It would be changed from within. The day Jezebel entered Israel, no one called it an invasion. There were no armies, no siege towers, no smoke rising on the horizon, only celebration. The gates of Samaria opened wide, stone walls covered in banners, trumpets echoing through the city. Crowds filled the streets, pressing forward, waiting to see their king return, and the woman who would stand beside him. To them, this was victory. An alliance with Phoenicia, access to wealth, trade, security, a future stronger than before. But what they didn't see was what entered with her. Jezebel did not arrive alone. She arrived, prepared. Her procession stretched behind her. Carriages, servants, officials, and among them, the most important element of all, priests of Baal, not hidden, not disguised, their robes marked with foreign symbols, their presence calm, deliberate, intentional. In their hands, they carried scrolls, ancient ritual texts, words that shaped belief and controlled perception. Others followed behind them, carrying sacred objects, small idols, figures of Baal crafted from stone and metal, wrapped but not completely concealed. And in the air, there was a scent unfamiliar to Israel. Incense, thick, heavy, lingering. It moved through the streets, clinging to the air, as if an entirely different world was entering with her. These men did not look like visitors. They looked like part of a system, structured, organized, purposeful, because they were. This was not a visit. This was the arrival of something designed to stay. As her chariot moved through the city, people reacted in different ways. Some admired her beauty, some whispered, some felt something, but couldn't explain it, because there was something about her that did not belong, not outwardly, but deeply. She did not wave. She did not smile widely. She observed, her eyes scanning the crowd, measuring, reading, understanding. Not a queen entering her people, but a strategist entering her opportunity. Inside the palace, the wedding ceremony began. A union of two kingdoms, a political victory. But even here, the difference was undeniable. The priests stood at the edges, watching, present. The scrolls were placed nearby. The incense continued to burn. Subtle symbols appeared in corners, on objects, in gestures, small but real. Some noticed, but no one spoke, because everything still felt acceptable. And that was the first shift, because once something feels acceptable, it becomes allowed. And once it is allowed, it begins to spread. Then came the moment that changed everything. The procession stopped. The covered carts were brought forward, heavy, guarded, silent, until they were opened, and inside, wealth, grain, oil, fine fabrics, jewelry, more than most had ever seen. And then, the unexpected happened. It was given away, freely, to the people. No demand, no requirement, no visible cost. Hands reached forward, voices rose. Laughter, relief, gratitude. Because this wasn't how power usually worked. This felt generous, kind, good. And Jezebel watched, silent, focused, because she understood exactly what was happening. They weren't receiving gifts. They were forming loyalty, because people do not question those who provide for them. And in that moment, the first barrier collapsed, not through fear, but through gratitude, not through force, but through desire. And while the people celebrated, the priests began their work. The scrolls were opened. The first words were spoken. The incense continued to rise. The idols were placed. At first, small, subtle, but present. They entered the court, not as outsiders, but as an extension of the queen's authority. They spoke, they taught, they reframed ideas, redefined power, redefined blessing, redefined prosperity, and slowly, language began to change. Then came the rituals. At first, private, behind palace walls, small gatherings, fire, chanting, offerings, nothing public, nothing alarming, but enough to exist. And once something exists, it grows. Then came the moment no one could ignore. A decree. A temple would be built, not hidden, not symbolic, but real, in Samaria, for Baal. This time, people felt it, not loudly, but deeply. Something inside them shifted. Something didn't feel right. But they hesitated, because this was the queen who gave, the queen who brought prosperity, the queen they had accepted. And hesitation is where resistance dies. Because while they hesitated, the system expanded. More priests arrived. More rituals spread. More influence took root. And soon, what once felt foreign felt familiar. That was the turning point. Because once something feels normal, it becomes permanent. And Ahab was no longer leading the change. He was following it. Because this was never just a marriage. It was an invasion, not with armies, but with belief, not through violence, but through influence. And by the time anyone understood, Israel had already begun to change. From the inside. Jezebel didn't force Israel to change. She made them want to. That was her greatest weapon. Because force creates resistance, but desire creates surrender. At first, nothing felt different. The markets were still open. Farmers still worked their land. Families still gathered at night. And the name of God was still spoken. But something had shifted, quietly, almost invisibly. There was now another option, and it didn't demand attention. It attracted it. It began in homes, small gatherings, neighbors inviting neighbors, friends inviting friends. Just listen. No pressure, just in case. And inside those rooms, the priests did something subtle. They didn't replace God. They reframed him. Your God is powerful, but distant. Baal is immediate. That was the shift. Not rejection, comparison. Because once you compare, you begin to question. And once you question, you begin to drift. A farmer sat in silence. His land had been dry for months, cracked, lifeless. He had prayed again and again, but nothing changed. Then the priest said it. Maybe your God is testing you, or maybe you need someone who responds. That thought stayed. It didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like logic. That night, he whispered a different name, not instead of God, but alongside him, just in case. Days passed. Then the sky changed. Clouds gathered. Wind shifted. Rain fell. And in that moment, truth didn't matter anymore. Interpretation did. Because what people believe is not based on facts. It's based on meaning. And meaning can be shaped. The farmer stood in the rain, thinking one thing. It worked. That was the moment. The first shift. Not in the sky, but in the mind. Because once a person connects outcome to belief, they repeat it again and again until it becomes dependency. And dependency is control. That was the system. Invisible, psychological, powerful. It spread to others. A mother, a merchant, a family, each with a problem, each with fear, each with a need, and each finding a faster answer. Not better, just faster, and faster wins. Then came the festivals, and everything accelerated. Music, drums, dancing, emotion, energy, not quiet worship, but overwhelming experience. People didn't just attend, they lost themselves in it. Because experience overrides conviction, and emotion overrides truth. Young people ran toward it. Then families followed. Then entire communities. And slowly, belonging replaced belief. That was the hidden layer. Because people don't change for truth. They change for belonging. And once belonging is attached to a system, leaving it becomes painful. That's when pressure began. Not from Jezebel, from the people. A man refused to join. At first, nothing happened. Then came distance, less conversation, less trust. Then came loss. Trade disappeared. Opportunities faded. Because now, belief was currency, and he wasn't aligned. That was the trap. Because now, survival required compromise, and compromise felt reasonable. So people made a decision, not to abandon God, but to divide loyalty, God and Baal, just in case. But that decision was irreversible, because divided loyalty eventually chooses sides. That was the point of no return, because from that moment, they didn't stop believing in God. They just stopped relying on Him. And that is how a nation falls. Not through destruction, through redefinition. But something else was happening, quietly, unnoticed. While the nation shifted, someone was watching, not participating, not adapting, watching. A man who saw through it, who understood. This wasn't change. This was replacement. He saw the patterns, the manipulation, the illusion of results, and he refused it. While others adapted, he separated. While others blended, he stood apart. And soon he would speak, not softly, not carefully, but with fire. And when he did, everything would change. Because Jezebel had transformed a nation, but she had not eliminated truth. She had only buried it. And truth does not stay buried forever. At first, it was influence. Then it became power. And power always demands control. Jezebel had already changed the nation, but there was one problem. Not everyone had changed. Not completely. There were still voices, hidden, quiet, but dangerous. Prophets, Men who refused to adapt. Men who refused to compromise. Men who still spoke the name of God. And that was something Jezebel could not allow. Because influence can tolerate doubt, but control cannot tolerate truth. So the strategy changed. No more persuasion, no more invitation. Now it was elimination. Orders were given, quietly, systematically. Find them, hunt them, erase them. And it began, not loudly, not publicly, but efficiently. A prophet disappeared in the night. No warning, no struggle heard. Gone by morning. Another, dragged from his home. Neighbors watching, no one moving, no one speaking, because fear had already taken root. Soon, it wasn't random anymore. It was organized. Lists, names, locations, people being tracked, watched, followed. This wasn't chaos. This was a system. And the message was clear. Silence, or disappear. But not everyone submitted, because inside the palace, there was a man who served the king, but feared God. His name was Obadiah, and what he did was dangerous. Because while Jezebel hunted prophets, he hid them. Not one, not two, hundreds. He took them into caves, split them into groups, 50 in one cave, 50 in another, feeding them, protecting them, keeping them alive, every day, risking everything, because if he was discovered, he wouldn't just die, he would suffer. That was the tension, because now truth didn't just cost belief, it cost survival. Outside, the hunt intensified, villages searched, homes inspected, strangers questioned. No one trusted anyone anymore, because anyone could be hiding someone, and anyone could report you. That was the shift, because now fear controlled behavior, not belief, not truth. Fear. And fear is the most effective form of control. A man whispered a prayer, then looked around to make sure no one heard. A family stopped speaking openly, even inside their own home. Children were told, do not say that name outside, because now truth had become dangerous and lies had become safe. That was Jezebel's victory. Not just changing what people believed, but controlling what they were allowed to say. And Ahab did nothing. He saw it. He knew it, but he allowed it. Because by now, he was no longer king. He was part of the system. But even in the darkness, something remained, hidden, protected, waiting. Because while prophets were being hunted, they were not gone. They were surviving, preserved, for something coming. And beyond all of this, there was one man, not hiding, not running, watching, understanding. He saw the pattern, the manipulation, the fear, the illusion, and he knew this would not end quietly, because this was no longer influence. This was war, and war demanded confrontation. Soon, he would step forward, and when he did, there would be no more silence, no more hiding, no more compromise, because the next moment would force a choice, God or Baal, truth or illusion. And when that moment came, two fire would answer. For 3 years, the sky did not move. No clouds, no rain, no relief. The ground cracked open, crops failed, animals died, and the promise of Baal was exposed, because Baal was supposed to control the rain, but the sky remained silent. The people felt it, not just physically, but internally. Doubt, quiet, dangerous. But no one spoke it out loud, because by now, fear controlled everything. Then Elijah appeared, not announced, not expected. He walked into the presence of Ahab, the king who had allowed everything. And Ahab saw him and said one thing, "Is that you, troublemaker of Israel?" Elijah didn't hesitate. "I have not troubled Israel. You have, you and your father's house, because you abandoned the Lord and followed Baal." That moment shifted everything, because someone finally said it, out loud, without fear. Then Elijah made the demand, "Gather everyone, all Israel, and the prophets of Baal. Meet me on Mount Carmel." And they came, because even Ahab needed answers now. The people gathered, thousands, weak, hungry, tired, standing between belief and reality. Elijah stepped forward and asked the question no one wanted to hear. How long will you waver? How long will you stand between two sides? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. Silence. Because the people knew they had already chosen. They just didn't want to admit it. So Elijah set the test. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, no fire. Call your God, and the one who answers is God. The prophets of Baal stepped forward, hundreds of them, confident, loud, certain. They called out, they shouted, they danced, they demanded. Morning passed, nothing. The sun climbed higher, heat pressing down, still nothing. The people watched. At first, confident, then uncertain, then uneasy. Elijah spoke, calm, sharp. Maybe he's asleep, maybe he's busy, maybe he's not listening. The crowd reacted, nervous laughter, tension rising. But the prophets lost control. They screamed, they cut themselves. Blood falling onto the altar, desperation turning into chaos. Because when belief is false, it eventually collapses. And when it collapses loudly. But still, nothing, no fire, no voice, no answer, only silence. Then Elijah stepped forward, and everything slowed. He rebuilt the altar, stone by stone. 12 stones, 12 tribes, a reminder of what they had forgotten. Then he placed the sacrifice and poured water once, twice, 3 times, until everything was soaked, impossible to burn, because this moment could not be questioned. Then he prayed, simple, direct, answer me, so they will know you are God. And then fire fell, violent, instant, absolute, consuming everything. The sacrifice, the stones, the water, even the ground. The people collapsed. Fear, shock, clarity. The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. And in that moment, truth was undeniable. Then Elijah gave the command, seize them, do not let them escape. And the prophets of Baal were taken, because deception has a cost. But the story wasn't finished, because the sky still had not changed. Elijah turned and looked upward. Then he told his servant, go, look toward the sea. Nothing. Again, nothing. 6 times, nothing. Then a cloud, small, barely visible, but real. And Elijah said, the rain is coming. And then the sky broke. Rain returned. Not Baal, not chance, God. And in that moment, everything Jezebel built began to crack. Fire had fallen from heaven. The people had seen it. They had declared it. The Lord, He is God. It should have ended there. It should have been over. Victory, clear, final. But it wasn't, because truth revealed does not guarantee transformation, and power never surrenders quietly. Inside the palace, Jezebel listened. Every detail, the fire, the crowd, the execution of her prophets, hundreds, gone. Silence filled the room. Not fear, not grief, calculation. Because Jezebel didn't react emotionally, she responded strategically. If fear had failed, she would become fear. She sent a message, not an army, not a speech, a message. Short, precise, deadly. By this time tomorrow, you will be dead. That was all it took. Because fear does not need explanation. It needs certainty. And when Elijah heard it, everything shifted. The man who stood against hundreds ran. Immediately, instinctively, completely. Because this wasn't a public battle anymore. This was personal. And personal fear hits deeper. He ran into the wilderness. Alone. No crowd. No victory. No fire. Only silence. And exhaustion. Because adrenaline fades, but reality remains. He kept walking, further, deeper, until his body couldn't continue. He collapsed under a tree, and for the first time, he stopped fighting. I have had enough. Take my life. I am no better than those before me. This wasn't fear. This was collapse. Because when purpose is fulfilled, emptiness can follow. He expected victory, change, transformation. But nothing had changed. Jezebel was still in power. The system still stood. And now he was alone. Or, at least, he believed he was. That was the lie. The most dangerous one. I am the only one left. Because isolation distorts reality, and exhaustion amplifies it. He fell asleep, not peacefully, but from collapse. And then something unexpected happened. Not fire, not power, not spectacle. An angel touched him. Get up and eat. Simple, practical, human. Food, water, strength. He ate, then slept again. Because sometimes the most spiritual thing is rest. The angel returned. Again, get up. The journey is too much for you. And this time, Elijah listened. Because restoration comes before direction. He walked 40 days, 40 nights, into the wilderness, until he reached the mountain, the place where everything changes. And there, God came, but not how Elijah expected. Not in power, not in fire, not in spectacle. A wind came, violent, breaking rocks, but God was not in it. An earthquake came, shaking the ground, but God was not in it. Fire came, the same fire he had seen before, but God was not in it. And then a whisper, soft, precise, personal, and Elijah listened, because this time he understood. God was not proving power, he was giving direction. You are not alone. There are still 7,000 who have not bowed. That changed everything, because Elijah's greatest fear was not Jezebel. It was isolation, and it wasn't true. The story wasn't over. The system wasn't complete, and Jezebel had not won. Because what comes next is not confrontation, it is judgment. Jezebel believed it was over. The system was complete. The people had changed. The prophets were gone, and fear ruled everything. For years, nothing challenged it. No resistance, no opposition, no voice strong enough to rise. Because once fear becomes normal, it becomes invisible. But what Jezebel didn't understand was this: control is never permanent. It only appears that way until the moment it breaks. And long before that moment came, a word had already been spoken. A warning, a judgment, through Elijah. The dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. At the time, it sounded impossible because power creates the illusion of immunity. But prophecy does not depend on power. It waits, and when the time comes, it unfolds. Years passed. Ahab died. The throne weakened. The system remained, but something underneath it began to crack, quietly, slowly, inevitably. Whispers began to return, not loud, but spreading. People started to remember, not belief, but truth. Some dared to question, some dared to speak. And when fear weakens, control begins to collapse. Then came Jehu, not announced, not negotiated, not controlled. He moved fast, driven, relentless, toward Jezreel, toward Jezebel. The watchman saw him first, a chariot, driving like a storm, not slowing down, not stopping. Messengers were sent, none returned. Another was sent. He didn't return either, because this wasn't a visit, this was a purge. And as he approached, the city felt it, not as news, but as tension. Something was ending. No one said it, but everyone knew. This time would be different. Inside the palace, Jezebel heard, and for the first time, there was no system to hide behind, no crowd, no illusion, only reality. But even then, she did not run. She prepared. Carefully, deliberately, she painted her eyes, adjusted her hair, stood at the window, looking down, because Jezebel understood something. If she could not control the outcome, she would control how she faced it. Because even at the end, she chose control over surrender. Jehu arrived, stopped, looked up, and asked one question: who is on my side? Silence, heavy, uncomfortable. No one wanted to move first, because the first is always the most dangerous, but also the one who survives. Then, movement. 2 servants. Then, another. Looking down, not at a queen, but at power that was ending. In that moment, Jezebel realized they were not betraying her. Power had already left her, because loyalty is never permanent. It follows strength, and strength had shifted. Throw her down. No argument, no hesitation, no warning. They moved. In that moment, everything slowed. The wind, the light, the silence. Then, the fall. And in a single moment, everything changed. Jezebel fell, not slowly, not gracefully, violently, from the height of control to the ground of judgment. Her body struck the earth. Final, irreversible. Blood splattered the wall, the horses, the ground. No royalty left, no image, no power, only reality. But the story did not end there, because prophecy never stops halfway. Later, when they came to bury her, there was almost nothing left. No body, no identity, no power, only fragments. Because the dogs had already come, just as it was spoken, not symbolic, not metaphor, real, unavoidable, inevitably. The queen who controlled a nation could not control her own end, because power without truth always collapses, and control built on fear always turns against itself. But this story was never just about Jezebel. It was a pattern, a system, a strategy. Change belief slowly. Normalize compromise. Replace truth quietly. Use desire first, then fear. And by the time people realize, they are already inside it. That is why this story still matters, because it never stopped. It only changed form. Different names, different systems, same pattern, same deception, and the same question remains. How long will you stand between two sides? Because in the end, there is no middle ground, only a choice.